Okay, looks like we're all set.
All right, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Averill Park Central School District Board of Education meeting on April 20th, 2021. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And that brings us to our next agenda item, which is the superintendent's report.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so we have our agenda. The report for this week. We have a couple of events I wanted to highlight that are coming up at the high school as we continue to really search for ways to engage our students. Our off-Broadway players are playing an outdoor drama production that'll be coming up there in mid-May. And you can see the outline of our plan there, really very similar, obviously, to the successful outdoor concert that we had. That's sort of the model that we're using. That model's been approved by our county DOH and kind of following suit with that. And we're going to move forward to continuing to provide some opportunities here. Sorry. The second event, in addition to that, is the music department's outdoor vocal and instrumental concert. So again, following up this one, however, instead of being in the parking lot, we're looking at the football field. And you can see some of the details in there again, and we're running this stuff by DOH, so make sure we'll have their blessing on this stuff. But we are trying desperately to safely engage our students as best we can. And we thank our music department for continuing to push the envelope and provide opportunities for our kids the best of our abilities. We are switching directions a little bit from the testing side. You're gonna see that coming up to the vaccine side. So now the state has recently extended the eligibility to anyone 16 or older. We're very fortunate to have a local partner that has reached out to us in Young's Pharmacy. Our county actually has also reached out too about vaccine clinics. The one that we're working on now is with kind of in conjunction with a local school district or two, depending on how the numbers shake out. We have a survey out now to our high school students to gauge interest. That's obviously a key factor in this. And once we get an idea, which that survey closes tomorrow, it's a short, quick one, because like everything else, we're under the gun a little bit on this. We want to try to provide that opportunity for our own students, either on our campus or on the campus of our kind of partner school. And if that doesn't work out, there's also, as I said, an opportunity with the county to do some clinics, possibly even on our own site. The DOH guidance is out, as you know. We've talked a little about this. We are kind of officially going forward with not making any changes based on this guidance. I know we've talked a little bit about this. I kind of wanted to, I guess, officially or formally, whatever, let the board know. We have a message drafted to the community as well. This includes a few big things, the 12 feet to 6 feet in music and the 6 feet to 3 feet overall. And we've kind of talked a little bit about how the 6 feet to 3 feet really does not provide us any benefit. Our elementary students are already in, our middle school and high school students are already in on the hybrid schedule. We really don't have the ability right now to bring them back for a variety of reasons, county transmission zone rankings and the stuff that we have in trailers that we'd have to bring out, and busing. And the big one, of course, is meals. They didn't change that guidance. The other thing that we've decided to do is stay with the 12 feet in the music department. This was one of probably the tougher decisions as we really went through it. We've talked with our nurses, we've talked to the music department, we've had 1,000 conversations, we've talked with our DOH. The big issue for us is that our county DOH has been pretty clear that they are not going to change their quarantine guidelines. So even if we go from 12 to 6, they are still going to quarantine, which would be following the state guidance. They would still be quarantining out to 12 for the ensemble groups. So the risk reward there just did not seem to be worth it. We felt like we're providing the opportunity to the students, and we understand that the issue is really more of a quality of the performance, and it didn't seem to justify that jump in quality for the jump in the potential exposure and the impact that would have on large groups. So we'll kind of keep an eye on this. We're able to do more outside and that type of thing, but that's kind of where we are now with this. And then finally, on the high-risk spring sports, this is up to the date information. Questar has conducted over 5,500 tests of athletes and coaches. They've had 11 positives, which you can see the positivity right there is less than 1% of those 11 forward in our county. And so based on this information, as well as where we currently are as a district, decided to not test our student athletes in boys lacrosse, which is the only higher risk spring sport. We'll continue doing it for volleyball and football, which are our current fall 2 sports. I did survey folks. To my knowledge, there's no school in our 3 county BOCES, Columbia, Greene, Rensselaer, or in the entire suburban council that is conducting COVID testing for the spring. With the exception of East Greenbush, they said they are going to continue doing it on a voluntary basis. The key thing here is that last line. If we begin to see an increase at any point, we'll reinstate it. But at this point, with that percentage rate being so low, we thought we would try and move in this direction. Again, we'll closely monitor. The issue is we're trying to switch now to the vaccine side and getting clinics together and tracking that information. We also need to start switching to COVID testing for senior events. The high school is working busily on prom/picnic, graduation. And with the newest guidance in that, we have some opportunities to do some things. Those things are going to require either a spectator or a participant to be vaccinated or have a negative test within a certain window. So we're trying to kind of shift our focus there. And Sharon used to use the term selective abandonment. We're using the same people over and over again to do the same things. And the juice worth the squeeze here on this one, we thought it was time to pull back on this a little bit. There is a human cost to it. Obviously, Val and Rebecca as our directors of nursing and Rachel's our trainer have not and would not complain in a million years, but they're the ones that are on the front lines doing this. And we just thought we'd pull back on the testing for right now, focus on the end of year events. We're doing a lot of meetings to plan the outdoor events that were just kind of mentioned, as well as other stuff like Mr. AP, which is coming up on Saturday. So we're just kind of shifting our focus a little bit, focusing more on a change a little bit in direction as we move through this and get through the spring. So that is the board report. A lot of information as the ball kind of keeps moving and we keep trying to stay a little bit ahead of it when possible. So any questions on that? All right, we'll go to our celebrations of success. All right. So we thank Brian again for his video. That was a week's worth of stuff only since we just met last week. A lot of good things going on in the last week, as you can see. And with that, concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I'd rather have it see all the members as opposed to look at the agenda. Do you mind?
Not at
I mean,
all.
I know with the budget stuff, we'll need to do that, but
Yep.
it's easier for me. Okay, thank you. So good report and nice celebrations of success, like you said, in just a week. We had a lot going on, a lot of good things. That brings us to item number 4, the public comment. Community members seeking to provide questions or comments to the Board of Education should email them to the district clerk. I don't believe we've received any as of yet for this meeting. That brings us to item number 5, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion? Anne, seconded by Chris. Any discussion? I just wanted to note one retirement of Ruth Sutton. She's a bus driver and food service helper. We certainly thank her for her service to the district and we wish her luck in her retirement. Any other comments, questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item number 6, the approval of the revised 2020-2021 district calendar. Do I have a motion? Peter, seconded by Anne. Discussion.
I just want to make sure I'm clear because I was confused. This was because of the flip-flop with the dates. We weren't sure about the dates, and then the snow dates where some buildings had snow day and some buildings didn't.
Yes and no. So every year we usually, not most years, we have to do some form of a revised calendar because you build the snow days in and then there's contractual language about the number of days and there's the state aid days. So usually we have some form of revision unless it happens perfectly. This year was a little more confusing because we had those emergency days where we weren't in school, but we got the days back from a state aid point of view. And as a result, had to tweak some things. It was a little bit odd this year because our levels are not at the same. Elementary, middle, and high school have different numbers of days. So part of it is that in response to just the situation with the 2 closure days, one for the elementary, one for the high school. Part of it's because the emergency days, and part of it just because what we have to do anyway. What made this one even trickier is the Regents situation. So those little R's in the calendar are always for Regents days. Our federal government's requiring the state to give the Regents. Their state's now only going to give those 4 to meet the accountability requirement. So we typically would have more days of Regents. So that's another change on there, that there's more days of instruction that are for the high school. And then we had to make some adjustments on that. So a lot of moving pieces on this schedule. And what we wanted to do was get it out, or this calendar, get it out. And then our plan is for our principals to message out. Brian Radowitz will get out the calendar tomorrow with a kind of general note. And then the principals are ready after that in due time to message to their particular buildings the intricacies. The high school is very much up in flux right now because we don't know how many kids are going to sign up for the Regents because those are kind of optional right now. So we may turn those into days of instruction, or we may, who knows? We just don't know what's going to happen there. But the plan right now is through the Regents days and see who signs up and go from there. So.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll call it to a vote. All those in favor of adopting the calendar?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Which brings us to item number 7, discussion of the proposed revenue budget and the proposed expenditure budget for the 2021-22 calendar year.
Do you need a motion? Oh, it's just a discussion. Okay.
Discussion right now, and then we'll approve the resolution in item number 8, and I will need a motion for that. So thank you.
So I think with this one in particular, I think Michael always says the budget's current and accurate until 5 minutes after you approve it, and then something changes, right? This one in particular has probably the most uncertainty in it, given the funds that we've received at the federal and the state level, and the directions that we're still getting from them in terms of what the money can and can't be used for, and then our actual plan to address those. We're meeting pretty, I can't even say daily, more than daily, to address summer school and develop a plan for that. And what will that look like this year? Because we have money spent on that. To address the learning loss component, which we're talking about bringing back teachers, especially in the AIS level, which is where we were cutting folks to help close that budget gap. We're talking about adding social workers to address that social emotional concern and trying to beef up in those areas, all while figuring out and finding out and following the requirements of not going off that cliff and being able to have these positions kind of drop into the general budget over time. Our plan is kind of do that through people filling in for future retirements. So all this stuff is very much in flux right now. And I think probably more than even in most years, need a little bit of trust that we have a plan that we're going to continue to develop and work through. I know Michael's got some information, I believe, to kind of share and talk through as well in terms of a little more of the details. You're muted, Michael.
No, sorry. All right. Yeah. So Jim's touched on this. This budget. So I'll just give you kind of like a little overview of like the things that have changed in this budget and the potential more changes that we actually have already
Michael,
implemented.
can you make that larger, please?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Better. So the things that we've already implemented that are included in this budget are the reduction of 4 FTEs of those AIS type positions. And this speaks to what Jim was talking about. So we're going to use those in the grant, the federal grant. And the idea is that as staff retire over the next couple of years, then we sort of, if these positions, are going to go, utilize them for the learning recovery, but as potential retirements happen, be able to move these back into the general fund so that we're bringing them out of the grant. The budget is already supporting that level of teachers, so that we're trying to avoid, again, the cliff as much as we possibly can. So this budget includes, so those were changes from the last time we talked, and it also includes 1 extra day of our communication specialist from BOCES, and it also includes, which we had talked about last time, is $250,000 that's in the buildings and grounds area for if the capital project doesn't pass, we're going to need some of those revenues to some of those expenditure resources to potentially do fixes to those areas, whether it be roofs or boilers or things like that. It's really not enough, but that would be the idea. I'm hopeful that when we go out for the project, that it does get approved. People will understand the importance of what we're trying to achieve for the district. And then in that case, if we don't need those resources for that line item, we're going to reallocate those to debt service for that project. So what that'll allow us to do is when we do go out for the project, if we know those resources are going to be available, I think we're looking at potentially like between 0.5% and 0.75%, maybe a little bit more, project impact on the tax levy. So that'll be helpful, I think, too, to getting the project passed when we talk, when we take it to the public in the fall. So that is in there. The communication specialist in, and the 4 FTEs extracted. So does anybody have any questions on those things? Okay. This is the 3-part budget. I actually never have showed this to you. Not many, Doug would know what this is because it's a required part of the public document. So we have to do a budget document that has several components in it. We actually share that with the board. There's a lot of information in there. And this 3-part budget was implemented by the state years ago as a way to show, how districts are spending their money administratively versus the actual program investment and, and the capital component of it. So I thought this would be interesting for you to see. And just as a, so you get a sense of these, you see the larger budget, the line item budget, and there's so many line items. This condenses those areas into the cost of the board operations, all the things, the central office staff, and it's everything. It's all the salaries and materials costs and contractual costs, all those kinds of costs, except benefits that are combined into these codes. And it's finances like the central office or the business office and treasurer and all those things, auditing and account, all the different auditing that we have done. The legal services, of course, that's our school counsel, our personnel office, which is HR, records management, public information, which is our BOCES service, and some other miscellaneous expenses. So the operations of plant and the maintenance of the plant, the buildings and grounds, they're considered a capital in this 3-part budget that's required. And then the security of the plant, that's our school resource officer, some other smaller things. But we also have some money built in there this year for COVID-related reopening expenses, whether they be, the supplies and materials for cleaning and our tent rentals and things like that. That's something too I wanted to point out when I was talking earlier, is that there are items in the budget right now, in the general fund budget, that we may very well, again, not spend those resources within the budget, which will help us in the long term because it'll give us monies at the end of the year that we can, include into our reserves for future use. Things like the summer school, where we always have budgeted, for the summer school work that we do. We may be able to utilize some of the federal funds to offset that and not spend out of the federal money. In the same way, there's money in the security of plant for, again, those COVID-related items. And if we have the ability to use some of those federal funds in this manner, then we may avoid utilizing these at this point. So then that will help us in the long term to save some money for the future of when we do sort of go off of the stimulus money that we are receiving. Central services, that's just the data processing from BOCES, the work that they do. For our special items is our insurance, water, sewer, our memberships into various professional associations, NISBA, rural schools, and those things. Curriculum development, that's all our curriculum work, and assess these. So that's like professional development, the board's professional development, supervision of the principals. That's our principal support, all those costs, research and planning. Those are our analytic tools that we use for students and our own internal analytic tools that are used to evaluate student performance and those kinds of things. Some professional development there. And then instruction, that covers all the categories of instructional codes: general instruction, special ed, library, technology, all of our support services and guidance and social workers and school counselors are all, everything, interscholastic athletics, it's all in that quote. Anything that you can think of that's student related is in that. And they also consider transportation as part of the program budget. Of course, the operating the transportation garage as well. And then there's a formula for allocating employee benefits across these categories. And then the transfers are just the two transfers that we have, one to the special aid fund to pay for the extended school year for the summer handicapped students, and also the transfer that's built into the budget to the food service program. All in all, so our budget is going to be $61,456,847. And this is to give you a little idea of, and I know you know this, right? That $31 million about approximately of that budget is in professional salaries across all of our salary codes. It's about 51% of the budget. And then the benefits, that's 17 million that these items down here are 28% of the entire budget. So 79% in salary and benefits. Any questions on this information? Okay. So how does that break out? And this is pretty consistent. Like, we don't see, this doesn't vary much. Our administrative costs as a component of the program of the overall, pretty close. It stays about 9% every year. And then our program, we're spending 77% of our district resources are in the program area. All right, so how are we going to pay for that $61 million budget? I showed you last week the, is this big enough? Okay, we good? Yeah. I showed you last week the tax levy cap, going through the calculation. I'm not going to go through that again, but I just want to show you, this is the biggest, item I would want to discuss tonight. And we talked about possibly not going to the full cap, but also the challenge of doing a zero tax levy increase. Our allowable levy increase under the tax levy cap this year is $617,000. That would be a 1.9% increase in the tax levy year to year. It's the lowest tax levy increase that we've had in the tax cap era, as I call it. And I think it sort of gives us an opportunity at this point, because, again, as I said, the challenge we talked about of the whole COVID situation, the impact it's had on our community, on taxpayers, an opportunity to recognize that by not necessarily going to the full cap amount, as we've done traditionally. We have been consistent about that every year, is to provide some relief, but also in order to maintain the stability long term, is to still go with at least the half of the tax levy. So we be going out instead of 617,000, we just take half of that, and what we'd be foregoing is $308,847 as the amount not levied. And there's no rollover, there's no recapture of that. We're foregoing that, in this year, and as part of that, the levy base, the 33 million going forward, we're giving up that forever. So just so you understand. Does anybody have any questions on that? So instead of using the 33,099,469, which is the levy limit, we would recommend a 32,790,622, which would be the actual levy that we would recommend, and forego the other half of the potential. So we're going to go 0.95 increase in the tax levy.
Last time we talked about moving, I think it was about 800,000 from reserves to supplement the tax levy or to decrease the tax levy. Is that still in this calculation?
It's actually going to be less. So I'm going to, as I go through, I'm going to touch on that too. Do you want me to go to that slide now and show you, or do you want to? Okay.
Go with your regular program.
Okay. All right. So any other questions on what we're suggesting here, recommending on tax levy? All right. So then if we go down and look at I do gotta reduce this a little, Peter. So if we look at the proposed revenue budget, which we shared with you in the portal, this is this is what we would be recommending as the tax levy. Again, it's 0.95%. It's half of the allowable levy. So we'd just be raising $308,000. So I looked forward. Any questions on that part? Again, it's incorporated into the revenues in that respect. And I'm gonna go back again to your question in a second, Doug. So I wanted to look out into the future, so you have a little bit of a sense of like, okay, and I think it's important, right, that we know. So what is giving up half the levy now? Sort of why in this year it's a good faith gesture. I think it helps the community, but it is the smaller levy that we've had. So,
Can you enlarge that, please?
Yeah. Are you looking? Are you on your phone?
I'm on a laptop here.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'm used to this big screen.
Thank you, Peter. I couldn't see it very well either. I'm practically on top of it. And I'm on a laptop.
All right. So the way I looked at the levy going forward, because I wanted to have a sense of, I don't want sort of next year when you're doing this calculation go, oh my God, what happened? Now our levy's 5-6%. So I just looked at next year. If the growth factor stayed the same, the capital exclusions are pretty set. We know what our debt service is going to be, and we know what the state aid on that debt service is going to be. So we know what the capital exclusion is going to look like going forward. I just said, okay, what if next year, rather than 1.23% as the levy limit, which was really low, that levy limit's the CPI increase year to year. So if we do see an increase up to 2%, which would be the maximum, what would that translate into next year if we went to the full levy? And we would be looking at about 3.21. So not drastic, but it's an increase, no doubt about it. But it's not. I just wanted you to be assured that it's not, that we're not setting ourselves up for something too dramatic. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. So in the situation as Doug referenced, the transfer from the reserve, we'd actually only use 500,000, and then we'd be balanced. Now, why we were able to balance, use some of the less reserves, not take the full tax levy, is because we'd already done some pretty significant work early on of reducing where we could in the budget. We've pulled out money and put it into the grant, and the goal is that we're able to bring those positions as we no longer need those student support learning recovery positions at the same capacity that we're going to use them now over the next couple of years. We're able to seamlessly bring those back in to fill retirements that are positions that are currently in the general fund budget. So we were recommending using $500,000 out of the reserves. And this starts to help us set up for the future. And there'll always be work to do because the reserves are not a recurring revenue source, right? So we were able to do this because of those expenditures we extracted from the general fund. We're also getting the increase in the foundation aid that's part of the budget. And we're grossing up our transportation aid, where if you recall from the last meeting, the conversation I had with you was about, we thought this was going to be far worse of what they were going to do in reducing aid in the current year, because the conversation around, hey, we're not going to aid any of these expenses in transportation after the shutdown in March, but they actually didn't do that. They did aid it. So that's why we're getting, we're bumping up the transportation aid that should flow from next year. So this gives us the balanced revenue side. And then I just want to touch on what's this mean, for the future of the reserves. So at July 1st, 2020, we had, so going into this school year, we had $3.5 million in the TRS, ERS reserves. I believe that we are going to get some money, some ability to restore some funds back into that reserve at the end of the current school year. So I'm just estimating at this point a couple $100,000. So that would be added back in. So we'll be at $3.7 million. This budget, the current budget does have, as you saw up there, a transfer of $869,000. So we're going to reduce that out. And then next year, the budget that we're going into, so the current year budget 2021 has that we're going to reduce that reserve by the amount of the 869. And then next year we're allocating $500,000 as a revenue source. So we'll be at 2.3 million, almost 2.4. And you got to just start figuring out, you may need more, but there's got to be a plan there to start tearing that down if you're not actually generating more year-end fund balance or year-end funds to replenish the reserve. So you'll get, even if you use 650 and 650 the 2 years after that, if you went up and trying to sort of brace against the cliff, you're still going to have $1 million in there at the end of 23, 24. So you might use more money. It's hard. It'll be easier to predict what you need to use as the budget gets built in 22, 23, and 23, 24.
Let me see if I understand all
Yep.
this. Going back to the other page, and you don't have to go back to it.
Slide, yeah, I can just shoot up here.
Instead of the, yeah, right there. Instead of the 800,000, you're only transferring half a million.
Correct.
But if 1 percentage point of the tax levy is equal to about 300,000 plus, if you transferred the entire amount, you could offer the taxpayers a real bonus of having a 0% tax levy increase. Is that right?
Well, yeah, you could, and you could also argue then that if we made this amount, so we have
I would be in favor of that
we have
because
three. Well, I mean, you could take the argument one step further. Then you could say, yeah, we have these reserves of 3.7 million. Well, we're going to have, let's say we're going into next year with 2.8. Why don't we make this 1.5 million and give them a tax reduction?
Well, I think 0 would be a bonus, just like the bonus we're giving some of our employees to the taxpayers.
I agree.
Spread out some of that wealth.
It could, but then what happens is this money runs out faster. And at some point, then what you're creating is a situation where you're going to have to either go for a tax levy above the cap. So you're looking for a supermajority vote, or you're going to have to cut more. I'm trying to, I guess I'd say, I'm just trying to do both. I'm trying to
I understand.
to protect the program and also to recognize the challenge of the circumstances.
I appreciate that. And one of the assumptions I think you're making is that part of that $4.5 million can't go back into reserves. Is that correct?
Oh, the 4.5 million that we have. Well,
so
not directly, not directly, but it goes to what I was saying before. If there are general fund expenditures that if we're allowed to sort of to not spend within the general fund because we have the availability to use the federal funds to make those, to cover those costs, that's sort of like I don't call it backdoor way of funding the reserves, for the future. I don't know that. I mean, we're not talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're going to pull out of the general fund. Because there's things that we want to do. I mean, there's the very same things that you talked about at the last meeting. If we're going to provide additional types of social, emotional supports for our students, we're not just going to be pulling those it's not as if our staff right now has idle time. So we're going to have to bolster those resources in some fashion, whether it's through additional FTEs or contractual services. But in order to get those things done, that you even talked about, that you stressed at the last meeting, we're not going to be doing that, able to do it with the current resources we have, because those folks are already, the technical term, straight out. Okay. So it's not as if that there's so much in that grant that we're suddenly going to like be able to roll $1 million in there. I don't think that's the case. I'm talking about a little bit here and a little bit there. Maybe the summer school overall is a few $100,000. I don't think we're going to pay for that whole thing out of the grant, but and we're bolstering the summer school above and beyond what we've done, because we're going to go to, and we haven't done this in 12 years, is have a real elementary summer school for learning recovery, and those resources will come from those grants. And it's likely that that's not going to be a one shot, one summer. It's going to definitely maybe need one or two or three. I think we need to be careful that we make sure that we don't overuse the grants, because we want to be able to make sure that we are able to achieve the goal in learning recovery that we will set out to make.
Mike,
I'm not making an assumption about millions of dollars. I'm talking about the 1 point increment, about 300,000. I think enhance the let's say the building project, when we can go back and say, we really did our best in terms of tightening the budget, allowing for a building project of X percentage, tax levy percentage. So we're not talking about a bunch, but we are talking about a percentage point in a tax levy of $300,000, which I think will go a long way with the public. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it would, but what we'd be doing is also destabilizing the foundation, because that tax levy, I'm a little, apprehensive even with the half, because that's just my nature, and because I know how challenging it was the last time we did that. That is a recurring revenue, and as much as it is an impact on the community, on the taxpayers. When we build that levy when we build that amount into the tax levy, it's a recurring revenue to try to utilize, sort of taking whatever we can and putting it into the reserve is fine, but that's not a recurring revenue. Building that tax levy, foregoing $600,000 this year means you're foregoing that $600,000 forever.
Mike,
and so I just want to go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to recap on our prior conversation, because you're bringing us, I think, exactly what we had originally discussed and asked for in regards to sort of that middle ground where we use some from the reserve and some from the levy. Because if I recall from the original conversation, we were, prior to the release of the federal funds for the stimulus, we were facing, as many of the districts in the state were, a pretty substantial cut to state aid. That sort of these funds have now sort of offset that a little bit to make it not look as bleak as it did originally. But also that because we don't know now these funds are only good for 2 years, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But then once we get to the other side of that stimulus package, we look to be on track to go back to that same bleak sort of state funding environment down the road. Like, we might need to spread out our reserves. That was where we were, right? Because I thought that the conversation was, and I get Doug's point, I do, in terms
do.
of community buy-in, I get it. But I thought that what we had originally discussed was that midway point, so that we wouldn't have to ask for the full levy. We could provide some relief to the community, but we wouldn't also be putting ourselves in a very precarious position later on. So I just want to make sure that I'm clearly coming from the historical point of what we're looking at now.
That's accurate. And also, I should point out, and I apologize that I didn't. Because this is an important factor. This state aid, this increase in the foundation aid, the 337, that for us, okay, so you have to understand the foundation aid is based on student enrollment. When they're talking about the foundation aid, there's actually built into the budget bills I think it's 3 years, it may be 4, but I'm at least 3 years. Built into the budget bills are automatic increases for districts that were underfunded based on the foundation aid formula. We are not underfunded. So we next year there's if there's no sort of additional funds that are allocated, that's it. That's our foundation aid. And the reason why we aren't going to see an increase is because that I said the foundation aid formula, which was developed years ago, our amount is based on a student enrollment number that's 500-600 students. I think about 500 less than it is now. So we aren't seeing growth in the student enrollment, and so we got basically the Save Harmless money this year. We got the 2%. There's nothing built in for us next year, so it's possible that this year's a pretty amazing that we are where we are. But don't expect that we would add $337,000 next year, and that means we're starting out with a So let's go back and revisit, okay? Because this is really important. This is really, really important in this conversation.
Michael, can I just jump in as you're scrolling there?
Yeah.
I think what that's important too is you're hearing probably a lot about how the state is going to fully fund, quote unquote, education. They are talking about what Michael's talking about. It's fully funding the school districts that are being underfunded in foundation aid. We are in the overwhelming minority that are not being we are good. We are not going to get more money. We are in the small portion that is going to either be frozen or maybe get something here and there, but certainly nothing we can count on. The 2 and 3 year projections are to fully fund those who are underfunded, not us. That's a big, go ahead.
So this, maybe you can still see the bottom of the other page, because this is really important. So next year, imagine this scenario. We say, okay, we're going to go to the full tax levy, and you guys agree to it. The board agrees to it. So that gives us about $1 million. Say foundation aid isn't no increase in foundation aid. Our budget, and then we go to that $650,000 amount that I talked about for instead of the 500, which is this year, we go up to that 650. So we're going to add 1.2 million, right? An extra 150 instead of 500. We're going to go 650. So we're going to add $150,000 of revenue. We're going to add 1.5 or 1,050,000. So we're basically $1.2 million of new revenue going into next year's budget. And now you say, oh my goodness, that's awesome. That's great. All right, so let's look at the budget. It's 61. And I'm just going to do a little math on my calculator here. 1.2 million divided by 6.46, 847. So if the budget increases 2% year to year, now this $463,000, 0.75%. Let's not forget, we cut $800,000 out of this budget. So this budget, and we pulled money out and put it over into the federal grants. We easily could have been at $1.2 million this year. And I can't stress enough, the health insurance was like a miracle, almost zero. ERS, TRS, no major increase. Those are coming down the line, and you can get to 2%. It's so 2% on 61 million is going to be that 1.2 million. You're going to, and you're going to have a problem, because I don't think 1.2 million is going to be enough next year. So it's either going to be a matter of cutting, and if your tax levy is another $300,000 less a year, then this number actually you won't even get to 1,052,000, because you're going to have a smaller base to start with. I wish I had the spreadsheet with me. I'm sorry to run the calculation for you, but I think it's going to be challenging enough just going to 0.95. But if it, it's going to sound weird, but I'm trying to make sure that you're solid. I mean, you're going to have whomever's in this seat next year is going to have a tough enough time. If you go to zero, it's going to be that much harder for you, and it's going to be that much harder for you to get to the program that you really want. It's not going to be easy anyways, even with all the federal funds and things like that, because you don't want to rely on that for recurring stuff. I mean, I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say, but I guess it's the board's call and on this, but
I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate your perspective and what you're forecasting for the future. If we go out with a 0.95 tax levy increase, I think that's very reasonable. And
I agree. I think that says a lot.
That's what we've got calculated here.
And you had mentioned something earlier, Doug. You said, we could go to the public and we'd be able to tell them we did everything we could. If we were at the full tax levy cap, 1.9 or 0.95, I feel like we've done everything. Even at the full tax levy, I'm going to tell you, I feel like we did everything we could, and we're going to keep doing more. We're going to do our best, but I just really feel like we worked really hard on this budget. To make it work and to not have it we did the very best we could, and we also did that without doing some of the real damage that we had to do in the past, not intentionally, but just by virtue of having no choice. We haven't done the damage. I wouldn't want to see you back in that position in the future if we can avoid it. So
I agree. As things change in terms of the usage of those federal funds, do you anticipate any major changes in terms of allowing for other expenditures that maybe we didn't anticipate being used for?
Not at this point, but we're there's more information becoming available. And I guess you could look at it this way too, Doug. If we do well, all right. So, and when I mean well, I mean, all right. So say we come out with more than 200,000 this year. We're able to offset a lot more than we anticipate at this point from the general fund. So we're able to shore up the reserves. So maybe you look at the tax levy again next year, and you're not saying, okay, we don't have to go here. Okay, maybe so you have another year to get some more information. The finances become clearer. The longer term becomes more clear. And maybe you're not going to 3.1 there. It could be 2.5, 2.75. But let's not be, in my word, too radical in this current year, where we're filtering through a lot of information and trying to maintain stability and the foundation. And we are doing trying to do the best we can for the community, and still maintain their school district in a viable long-term manner. And that's it. And that's my closing argument.
I'd just like to add that I completely understand Doug's perspective of the optics of being able to tell the taxpayers, hey, we're going to come out with a 0% increase. But I think the big takeaway here, it's been said a couple of times, is this is not a one-year thing where we plunk some money into the budget and say we can go without an increase at all. we're talking, this is forever because it gets carried forward. So you're not talking about 800,000 or 600,000 this year. You're talking about 600,000 every year, plus whatever else we're going to have to make up. And I know it's been said a few times, but I think it's important factor to understand. And I agree with the meeting in the middle, so to speak, with the 0.95 and setting us up. I mean, that's a huge part of budgeting is not just the upcoming year, it's the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And if we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot, you know, we're going to hurt people more later by helping them a little now. But I think that this is a good faith budget put forward saying, hey, we recognize the struggles of families, and, you know, this is a balance. It's a compromise. And to me, I know how important the capital project is. And I feel like even with this, with the less than 1%, we still have a strong footing to go to the community and fight for the capital budget as well. That's my take.
I agree.
The only thing at the bottom and you have this, that's the property tax report card that actually has to be approved and it's on the agenda. Frankly, it's just a summary of everything we just talked about. So, and it, you know, it deals with the tax levy, what the levy will be in the reserves and all of that. So there's nothing really more to say about that.
So is that, I'm assuming that's the end of the revenue budget presentation. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I just
I guess-
want to thank Mike for all of his time and effort and energy putting this together for us. It's a really very strong budget, very, you know, obviously points to the dedication that you've made to the district, and we're going to miss you next year. If you wanted to reconsider, we would probably not refuse.
Thanks. You know, that I always say that the budget is a product of, you think go back to the beginning, I'll be brief, but you go back to the beginning of the budget presentations. I mean, so many people worked all together. I mean, that's one of the great things about our district is we do have such a great team. Our, you know, our building leadership and our departmental leaders, our central office, you know, we all work and we have a, you know, I think a very focused and collective vision. You know, it's great working with everybody to develop the budget. So sometimes my part is just an accumulator of information and responding to what is important, which is having a really great program for the students of the district, trying to respond to their needs. And you know, everybody's unanimously focused in doing that. So I thank everybody else for all that they do to make it happen.
Yes, thank you. So we're gonna move to the expenditure budget. Jim, is that you or is that Michael some more? I'll let you guys take it away.
That was all of it. That was everything.
Oh,
You've got
okay.
it. So we'll move on to the resolutions and things if we're good.
All right. Well, let me just open it up if there's any questions on the expenditure budget, because I know we've gone over it, you know, in pieces as we move forward from the beginning of January. But I didn't know at this juncture before we work to approve the budget and put it out there for the public to vote on. Is there any other questions that any board member has? We want to make sure we're clear so we're good and feel comfortable voting.
I think it's a very well-crafted budget, and I'll echo what Megan said. a lot of work goes into that, and we appreciate your efforts, Michael, and those of your staff.
Definitely. Yeah, I just, I am too thankful that our administrators and everyone who helps develop the budget, like, Michael puts the pen to the paper and he's the accumulator of the information, but he really is thoughtful about this. And, I'm really thankful that our administrators are constantly paying attention to the fact that our community's well-being is incumbent on the school district well-being, and they work to strike that balance during budget season and all the time, especially this past year with making sure our students that needed to have resources had the resources they needed to work through school and to not be hungry in some cases. So it certainly speaks volumes that our community supports the district and vice versa.
Well put, Jesse.
Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts? Okay, well, then we will move on to the resolution, which is item number 8. Be it resolved to approve the proposed school district budget in the amount of $61,456,847 for the 2021-2022 school year, for a presentation to the residents of the Averill Park Central School District at the budget hearing on May 10th, 2021, and for a vote of the qualified residents of said school district on May 18th, 2021. Do I have a motion? Megan? Seconded by Ann. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Okay, on to item number 9, which is the elections of the Rensselaer, Columbia, Greene Counties Boards of Cooperative Education Services. There are 3 incumbent nominees for the 3 BOCES positions, but I do believe we need to vote on each one of them individually. So if I can have a motion to cast the vote for the election of Mr. Mark Mann. Megan, thank you. And second, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So 6-4-0 against. If I can have a motion to cast the vote for the election of Ms. Mary Morrow Giroux. Chris. And I think I saw Peter next. Oh, sorry. I thought you waved. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. 6-4-0 against. And then a motion that we cast our vote for the election of Mr. Frank Zwack. Megan makes a motion. Seconded by Ann. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 6-4-0 against. Okay, on to item number 10. The administrative budget for the 2021-2022 school year, which is a resolution that the Board of Cooperative Educational Services of Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene counties is authorized to expend the sum of set forth in the 2021-22 tentative administrative budget document in the amount of $6,710,997. Do I have a motion? Chris, seconded by Megan. Discussion.
I have a question, just in terms of feedback, because I read through it, but being that this is only my second year, I don't have a basis for comparison on how this budget affects our operations. So I'm curious, Jim, if you could, or Matt or anybody, what are your thoughts on this budget?
Yeah, I think it's a fair budget. I think over time, Michael probably could speak a little more to the historical portions of it, but I think it's something that it works, it meets our needs, it does what we need it to do, and it's certainly been a fair and worthwhile investment for us.
Yeah, right. What do I always say? Competing priorities and limited resources. Tons of things we'd love to do, but you got to do what you can. And like you said, the minute that the budget's passed, it becomes obsolete. Something's changing, and we'll have to adapt.
There are no
And that's
retirement funds in that budget, are there?
No, what?
Retirement funds. Speaking of historical.
Yep. And it does say tentative, Michael. That was interesting in the wording of the this vote. Does anyone have any other questions or discussion on this BOCES admin budget? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, passes unanimously 6-0. Okay, on to item number 11, a resolution. It is hereby resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the legal services retainer between the Averill Park Central School District and the Honeywell Law Firm PLLC for the 2021-2022 school year is approved by the board president and the board president is authorized to execute the retainer on behalf of the school district. Do I have a motion? Peter, seconded by Doug. Discussion. I know we had a committee that reviewed the proposal. Anne, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. Michael summarized the results of the committee discussion really, really well. So I'm sure everybody saw that. But my only question is, this is only speaking to what?
With Doug's help.
No, it was
I gotta give credit where
fantastic. I
credit's
was like,
due.
wow, that's really great. But the only question I have is it only indicates the 1 year, and I thought this was a 3-year agreement.
Good point.
Well, that's because the retainer is going to give us a 1-year retainer and then a 1-year retainer and a 1-year retainer. So, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
And we do that. The retainers at the reorg meeting.
Well,
on an annual basis.
Yeah, right. But we're doing this one because we're proving the next year's now, sort of early.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's really more or less in that, we're making a commitment, so to speak, of, that we're not going to bid this out again on, for a 3-year period, potentially, right? But there's actually language in that contract where we're not bound, like, so there's termination language, so. Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Doug, did you have any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you heard, I went through my little speech just a second ago, but maybe you didn't hear it.
We didn't.
Okay. I've had the pleasure of working with Jeff Honeywell in a couple of different districts and in a real variety of legal situations. I found him to be authoritative and pleasure to work with, and I totally endorse his firm working with us. The people that he has supporting him, Paul, for example, I've worked with a lot as well, and I find him extremely competent. So I totally endorse this resolution.
Hear, hear.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll just repeat a few things there, but just having been on the committee, it was clear as we went through it, and just, in terms of the work that Honeywell has done for us in the past, and was trying to see if there would be any competitive bids that would make us think differently. But in general, I mean, I think it's just very difficult to even consider anyone else based on how they have done for us and the benefit that they provided us as a district. So look forward to continuing to work with them.
Excellent. Megan?
I was just going to say, I was not on the committee, but I'm pleased to see the recommendation to move forward with Jeff's firm. He has managed to stand up to all of my what if scenarios and my lengthy, detailed questions. So I think that he has definitely done a great job for us, and I'm happy to, looking forward to working with him continuing.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for the input. Okay, is there anything additional? All right, then we'll call it to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to item number 12, the board member reports. Danny, would you like to say anything? Do you want to add anything about the senior events that are being discussed as we try to follow the new guidelines from DOH and state ed, or?
I know that Mr. AP is coming up, and I'm not a senior, I'm a junior, but
Okay.
I plan to watch virtually since the live is only held for the seniors. But I think it's really fortunate that we're able to hold that this year, considering last year we didn't get a chance to. So I'm excited to see that. So
Excellent. Good. Is there anything else you want to add, or are you all set for tonight then?
I just wanted to say that I thought the budget was also very impressive. So good job to Mr. Weemet for that. And that's about it.
Okay. Thank you. Anne?
I have nothing to report that I haven't already said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Megan?
Thanks, Jesse. I just have a couple of things. I really have been appreciative and impressed with the district administration for all of the different opportunities that they've presented to as many students as possible, thinking outside of the box, giving OBP the opportunity to put on a play, and the music department to put on concerts, and the different ways that they've managed to work around these restrictions, because we are still very deep in a pandemic. So trying to preserve that normalcy for the students, I know it's important to a lot of them. Also, I just want to give a shout out for the Every Student Every Day podcast. If you guys haven't checked out the podcast, it's a fun listen. So I don't get a lot of time in my day, but I have been listening to the podcast. I have found it to be informative and entertaining, and I think it's really great. And I look forward to future episodes. I think it's fantastic. Highly, highly recommend. So if you haven't listened to it, there's already a few episodes out there, all great content, and great job, Jim.
Feel free to share that review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. So thank you, Megan. I appreciate that. And thanks to Brian Radowitz, who's like always, the man behind the curtain who makes us look good. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Megan. Doug?
I just wanted to say, Mike, I appreciate the work that went into the budget. I know how much work it is to put together all those numbers and all the sheets for us. And I hope you don't interpret my questions or suggestions as criticism in any way. They're just meant to provide a perspective and perhaps additional thoughts for us to knock around. So I appreciate what you've done for us. I think it's a good budget going out this year. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Chris?
Okay. I echo what Doug shared there in terms of the budget. Very well put together. I think all of us go through this, and there's the peaks and valleys, and trying to hear what the feds, the state, various other groups will be looking to provide. So I think that we've got a very strong one to put out there for folks in May, and hope that it kind of helps carry some momentum here, and it keeps us in kind of a conservative pattern so that we're not overextending ourselves and still have some of that foundation, as Michael calls it, to ultimately be able to call on if things do end up being a little further south come future years. And I'm going to try to read this because I thought I'd try to do it a couple different ways. But with the submissions yesterday in terms of folks who are going to be petitioning to run for election this year, I just want to be able to share that, it's been a great 12-year run, but I've decided not to seek re-election. So time to see where else my services can be used, leveraged, taken advantage of, whatever we want to call them. Want to thank the public for having faith in me, and my current and former board members for their collaboration, as well as obviously Dr. Franchini and all the staff in terms of the dozen years here of working together. But this district means a lot to all of us here, as well as others who are actively participating in things. And even though there are many challenges that lie ahead, I'm very confident that the group here that's assembled on this call will continue to do great work and take care of things. So hats off to Dr. Franchini and his team. I'll always be available to continue to assist in some form or fashion. So keep me in mind for things as we go forward here. And thanks again.
That's great, Chris. Thank you. Peter?
Well, I was going to say I have nothing to add, but Chris, I guess I'm shocked, but it's been great being on the board with you for almost that same amount of time. And yeah, I'm going to miss you. We'll catch up for sure. So other than that, everybody be safe, be well. Take care.
Thank you, Peter. So yes, I agree with Peter. Chris and I have served on the board for the same amount of time thus far, and I sure will miss them, as we've had lots of conversation over the past almost 12 years about lots of board stuff and other things too. And I certainly will miss his friendship and camaraderie when he rolls off, but I certainly can appreciate that he is doing that, and enjoy your time. But you need your free time now, but you need to be careful what you wish for. You said you'd be available. Could come back and get you. No, we certainly appreciate it, Chris, and you will be very missed. And with that, I don't have anything else to add because I think everyone has covered it. So I think that brings us to item number 13, to adjourn the meeting. Megan is jumping out of her seat to make a motion, and Doug is seconding. Any discussion? Okay, we'll call it to a vote. All those in favor?